All right, y'all. Before we dive in, a quick heads up.
This show is raw, real, and definitely not rated PG.
We're talking about adult themes, sexual content, and the kind of stuff you probably don't want blasting through your speakers at work or around your kids.
So grab some headphones, pour your drink of choice, and get comfy.
Oh, and just so we're clear, we are not licensed therapists, counselors, or sex couches. Sex coaches,
Sex coaches.
not sex couches.
We're just a couple of people sharing our lives experiences and sexy adventures and ethical non-monogamy. So with that, pull up a chair and enjoy the show.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond Monogamy. I'm Adam.
And I'm Pris.
And today we have somebody really special. It's an actual treat. Today we've got someone that's hanging out with us. Her name is Francesca Gentille. Now, if you don't know about her, you're about to. She's been doing this kind of work for a long time where she's helping people figure out love, sex, intimacy, and kink. It's all the juicy stuff that we talk about on this show. She's a coach, an author, and honestly, just one of those people who knows how to mix wisdom with a whole lot of play. We are absolutely psyched to have her here.
Francesca is like this magical blend of sexy and soulful. She brings this grounded spiritual vibe into conversations that could easily just get raunchy, and she makes you think while still keeping it hot. I'm super excited for this one, babe.
Yeah, me too. With that, I'd like to welcome Francesca to Beyond
Yes,
Monogamy. Thank you
welcome.
for joining us.
Hey, I am so happy to be here. Oh, you're right in my passion and my favorite topics, and I could dig into this all day and all night. So excited.
I tell you, we were talking earlier, and I could talk to you all day. You're just a joy.
I'm gonna do tag. You're it.
That's right. I'm gonna start contacting you often, just because you're fun to talk to. So we're gonna jump right into it, Francesca. Let's get started with the obvious. How did you end up in this world of relationships, intimacy, and sacred kink? What exactly pulled you in?
I think with many of us, it goes all the way back. And when I talk to people about either sexual orientation, whether it's who we're attracted to, or even some of our core fantasies, with most people, I hear somewhere between 4 and 7, which is the first testosterone spike, or somewhere between 9 and 13, which is the second testosterone spike. But for myself, it really, that same time period, rather than being about my juicy fantasies, was about counseling my parents. So I was in the back seat trying to translate my mom to my dad and my dad to my mom, and actually doing it quite effectively, and recognizing that people could love each other, but still not understand each other. So that was right there in the beginning. And then my longest relationship to date was actually 14 to 23, and wonderful best friend, eventually vibrant sex life. And after about 9 years, and we had an open relationship, and after about 9 years, he called me and he said that he was in love with someone and it felt really different. And I said, "This is different. I need to find out more. I'm flying out to where you are." We were going to different graduate schools at the time. And it turned out that he identified as gay. He'd come out to himself really as gay. And that had me question, how did a man with whom I had a vibrant sex life identify as gay when I'd had more erectile dysfunction issues with men who were heterosexual? Like, how did that even work? And years later, we kept in touch. And years later, he said, "There was a point that I loved you so much, Francesca, it didn't matter what gender you were." And this was ahead of the pansexual comment, where we say that orientation, where we say we're oriented to this kind of the soul, the energy, not necessarily just the body or the gender. And he also told me that he identifies still as gay because he's more often attracted and more attracted to men. But the love that he had for me at that time gave him access to his eros. So that was something that had me start to question, how do we come up with our orientations towards our attractions or our fantasies or our desires? And then when I was 20, around 23 or 24, my dad got a little drunk and we were out to dinner together, and he asked me to be his lover. And I said no, and he didn't push it per se, but it really shocked me. And it was a break in trust between me and my father that I'm not sure ever got repaired. And that also had me question what had him think that this was a good idea, that this would be okay. And I think this kind of combination of just being so curious about human beings and these situations that happened in my own life had me study psychology, clinical sexology, later had me study neurobiology, had me study tantra and BDSM, and also recovery from trauma and the polyvagal nervous system. And I'm still studying. And I'm studying, like, how did our world get to a world that is often so violent, emotionally and physically and verbally violent, and often so disconnected from ourselves, the complex, multifaceted truths that exist in each of us, so disconnected from ourselves, let alone another person. So, how did we get here over sometimes thousands of years? And how do we get out? How do we get to a world of collaboration,
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask
compassion?
you. I was going to ask
You
you that,
know,
like, so how does that conversation around, because you've been in this for decades, so the conversation around non-monogamy and kink, how does that, has it evolved? Has it gotten easier, do you think? Has it gotten harder or weirder? Do you see it going a different path?
I think that every decade tries to individuate from their parents and define themselves really as something new. I'm not like my mom, I'm not like my dad.
Hmm.
So my son is monogamous and straight, and because he was individuating from me. But when I look at it just like a little slice of history from like the 60s until now, we see that the 60s was individuating from the 50s, a time of conservatism, a time of governmental marketing to get women out of the workforce, to get everyone into one house so that there would be a lot of consumerism and we could like boot kick the economy. So this nuclear family idea didn't even exist before the 50s. And this really strict way of looking at the family was, in a sense, an invention. If we go back far enough cross culturally and throughout time, now we're talking in some cases thousands of years, we're seeing communities that are more clan based. We're seeing they're often more matrilineal, and that, like the Celts, for instance, the ancient Celts, you wouldn't have your own child or your own son inherit. If you needed to have a son inherit, it would be your sister's son. And the reason that you wouldn't have your own son inherit was because they practiced non-monogamy. So they didn't assume that your partner's son was actually your child, your partner's daughter was actually your child.
Wow.
Once you had a child, you would have a family unit. So when you were exploring sexuality with someone, it was very common for the Celts to have a year and a day hand fasting, a year and a day promise of kind of an experimental bonding. And then at the end of the year and a day, if people felt that they weren't the right unit, they could just come in front of the community and kindly separate, unless you had a child. If you had a child during that year or from that year, you were considered a family unit. So that the child would have a home, but also the whole tribe would feel like they were there to take care of the child. It was a very different way of looking at the world than we have today. So this concept of the 50s, understandably, was very constraining for most people. And already in the 40s, if we know anything about kink, modern kink started from the men coming back from World War II
Right.
and having had these very close and intimate relationships in the barracks, and then wanting to have this sense of structure and hierarchy and community continue. So they created clubs, some of the most famous or strongest in New York and Chicago, to continue this sense of hierarchy and intimacy. And these were the first like leather societies. And so what we think of as modern BDSM started there, mostly for men.
Mm.
And then later, it wasn't until closer to maybe the free love in the 60s, the swinging of the 70s, the open relationships of the 80s, that we start to get a crossover between the gay leather societies and heterosexual community. And then we start to see more and more, like in the 80s, heterosexuals starting to explore BDSM, eventually heterosexual houses, leather hierarchy houses. And where we think of 60s free love, turn on, tune in, drop out. And then the 70s, no longer teenagers and 20s, families. Now we're looking at swinging so we can explore and have excitement, but still have a family. 80s, we're looking at open relationship so that we have a little bit more freedom in how we're exploring, but we still have our family. And I think of it as roots and wings. We have the roots of the family and we have the wings of exploration. In the 90s, my mentor coins the term polyamory, poly meaning many from the Greek, amory from the Latin meaning love. So it's leading with love into relationships. In the 2000s, we end up with sensual community, lots of sensual community, often connected to festival community like Burning Man or pagan festivals, etc. And then by the time you get to the 2010s, the heterosexual communities of BDSM have become prevalent enough that they're having conferences across the world and across the country. There's starting to be more and more what I see, and the 50 Shades of Grey, et cetera. So we start to have more and more what I call the queering and kinking of culture. And also from the 80s, 70s, 80s, and the feminist revolution, there was a problem in the feminist revolution where the beauty was saying women have rights and women have rights of their body and rights of their vision and rights of work. The problem in this feminist revolution was pointing the finger at men because the dominator model of culture, where only 1% of the population gets full rights and privileges, which we're still seeing today, that only a small percentage of the population, 1%, gets to have full rights and privileges, and everyone else gets less. That damages people with penises as much as people with vulvas. But in the feminist revolution, they were pointing at men. And this started to create, I call it the war of the sexes over sex. It started to create a confusion around how do we win together. So you were asking, like, how do we get here? How do we get to a place of collaboration and consideration? Given that it's still so confusing, given that we're realizing that we are not just hundreds of years into multi-generational trauma, but thousands of years into multi-generational trauma, I believe it really is, number one, we have to face how bad it is. Nothing can be changed until it's faced. We have to recognize there are these problems. There is this multi-generational trauma in our nervous system. The nervous system epigenetically holds trauma up 7 to 9 generations. So we can have reactivity, fears, angers, resentments, shutdowns that don't even belong to our personal trauma and our personal lifetime. So understanding it is the first step. And then we need to start to functionally integrate practices to rewire the brain from trauma, practices to develop new ways of communication, like nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg. We need to create a new vision of what healthy collaborative relationships are so that we know what we're working towards. And I also believe the Taoist and tantric practices are really important for calming the nervous system, for supporting connection, even a depth of connection in relationship over time. And then I've done a lot of research on BDSM, and the roots of BDSM before the 1940s, the roots of it are actually shamanic. And the deprivation of sensation or the intensity of sensation was used for vision quest. It was used to rebalance the body and the hormones. It was used to create trance states. I actually teach today how to do shamanic BDSM for those who want to utilize BDSM as healing from trauma, as transformation, as vision and connection to soul.
That's incredible. I read a bit of what you've talked about when it comes to trauma heal with BDSM. And that's something that I definitely want to dive into maybe on another occasion with you, if we can always get you back on the show and really dive into
that part.
into that specifically, because there's several people that we know of that can really benefit from that information. So that's definitely something we're going to have to get into. Now, was there a moment in your own life where you were like, yep, this is my thing, this is the path I'm walking, this is what I need to do?
Because you've had different like moments in your life where I think not tested, but that definitely had to have given you this path, right?
Yeah, I think each of us has an opportunity to either let the suffering of life beat us down or let the suffering of life inspire us to become something more. And this is a choice point for all of us, because life is interwoven with suffering and joy for all humans. Eventually, our parents will die. Eventually, if we're alive, people we care about will die. Eventually, we'll be betrayed or rejected. Eventually, we'll be confused or have an illness, or someone close to us will. And if we say, I'm only entitled to happiness and good times, that's the path of addiction. So I think we each have an opportunity to say, given that life periodically sucks, who am I going to become in the face of that? And so for me, those times, and there have been many times of intense suckitude. How about you all? But they've been there for me. And my parents disowning me when they learned that I was going to become a shaman, my partner of 9 years coming out as gay at the time, very confusing. Someone I was engaged to be married to, ending the relationship within months of my mother's death, the baby daddy of my son leaving and leaving me alone with my son without any financial or structural support. There's been various times that have, and I lost my job at that time too, was intense suckitude. And I say, I'm a really great person when you agree with me and you give me everything I want. I'm like, I'm really
Same.
nice. I'm really nice. But who am I when you don't? Who am I when you don't agree with me? Who am I when you don't give me what I want? Who am I when I'm actually suffering? And I believe that's the test for each of us of our core values, of what we are going to become in the face of life. So for me, these depressions, these traumas, these really terrible times have become dark nights of the soul, where there's an alchemy if we let ourselves. Instead of saying, how bad am I suffering? If we ask ourselves right now, how many billions of people in the world may have lost someone they loved for grieving the death? How many billions right now might be grieving the death of someone they loved? How many billions might experience that they've been lied to? How many billions might experience right now a sense of confusion or a sense of loneliness? And so for me, when I ask myself, it's a Buddhist practice, really, it's to soften our own personalized sense of suffering and connect to a more universal sense of suffering and allow ourselves to have compassion for ourselves and this human existence. To me, when I allow myself to do that, something new starts to arise, almost like some purpose in what I'm going through. And then I become very committed to say, how can I work through this particular suffering? And how can I make that road a little lighter for others? So that's been my journey, I would say, over and over.
I love that.
That's incredible. So your life and everything that you've gone through has led you to this path, and you're bringing everything that you've learned out to the open to so many other people. Like, you're really doing amazing work for people.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
So I do have a question. You mentioned before sacred kink, and I love that. But for folks who have never heard it, can you break that down? What does it actually mean in practice?
Sacred kink and practice, I think one of the foundational pieces, which is surprisingly easy, But it takes awareness, is the information that's been coming up more and more about the quantum field, that quarks are actually affected by the intentionality of the research observer. So quarks can either move in a dispersed pattern or a wave-like pattern. And when they were saying, how can they sometimes move in like a dispersed pattern, like a bomb going off, or a wave-like pattern, which sound and light move in waves, how could they sometimes do one and sometimes another? They realized that it was actually the expectations of the observer that was creating the difference. And so the theory, science is always a theory, not a fact. The current theory is that our thoughts matter. And in a sense, they're the smallest unit of matter. So when we think about our thoughts matter, and our thoughts are actually impacting they're impacting each other, that we are electromagnetic systems sending information and receiving information, then the foundation of sacred or conscious or shamanic BDSM would be to start with an intention. So instead of just saying, do you like flogging or not? Do you want to be blindfolded or not? Do you want to be spanked or not? What are your favorite sensations? Or do you want this to be a sexual scene or don't you? To actually say, do we have an intention for what's happening here? Is our intention to actually be more intimate, emotionally intimate, as well as perhaps physically intimate by the end of the scene? Is our intention in the scene to have you feel, if I'm the dominant, to have you feel a greater sense of self-trust or self-love? When I go to play parties that are kinky, I say to people, I'm a transformational dominant. They say, what's that? And I say, so if you tell me like you want to be spanked or flogged or tied up, I'm bored. I'm completely bored. But if you tell me why you want it, if you tell me like where are you heading? Now I'm excited. And this woman said, I just want to ask, should I take off my clothes for the scene? And I said, I don't know. It's not about me. Should you take off your clothes for the scene? And she said, I'm really embarrassed about my body. And I said, okay, is that something you'd like to bring into the scene? And she said, yes. So during the scene, she decided to take off everything but her panties. And then during the scene, I'd be, flogging or doing whatever I was doing. And then she'd say, oh, I'm getting sweaty. And I'd say, your skin is glowing and shining. I invite you to like breathe this in every time I've smacked you. I invite you to breathe this in, my skin. And I want to hear you say it. My skin is glowing and shiny. And she's like, my skin is glowing and shiny. And then there was a point where she said, oh, but my fat is jiggling. Like when you're striking me, my fat is jiggling. And I said, ooh, now I want you to breathe in. I am luscious. And my body is just luscious like the goddess. And I want you to say it. She's, my body is luscious like the goddess. So when we were doing aftercare and she was under a blanket and I was holding her, at one point she throws the blanket back and she's just in her little panties. And she says, my body is beautiful. And if somebody doesn't like it, they don't need to play with it. And I like, yes. And to me, that was the excitement of doing the scene.
That empowerment.
That
was what was exciting for me. Not whether or not I flogged her or cuffed her, tied her up. For me, that's not what excites me. I'm excited by where's your wholeness getting to with this? And then if I'm working as a couple, if I'm with a partner, then I might also say, is there something that we want to deepen in our wholeness as a couple? Or I might also support my partner, or they might also support me. I'm technically a switch in what are we moving towards in terms of wholeness.
I find that so interesting. You know, what's funny is I've said from the start when we started in the lifestyle and as we learned more about kinks and that sort of thing, I feel like almost every one of us, and I can't speak for everybody, but I think there's a lot of us that are in the lifestyle and in the kink lifestyle as well. And a lot of what we like and a lot of what our kinks are a result of trauma that we've had in our past. What are your thoughts on that?
This is a very rich and nuanced and depthful question. First, I want to say something that's so important. When we're looking at what percentage of our desire templates come from trauma, and is there something that would benefit by healing, by being faced, by being healed? Like for most of us, yes. However, just because I heal my trauma doesn't mean I'm no longer kinky, doesn't mean I'm no longer queer, doesn't mean, so there's like some people who are very normative might start to think, oh, when we heal their traumas, they'll be monogamous and straight and,
Everything will go back to quote unquote
everything,
normal.
quote unquote normal. And I just want to let that thought go. So an example could be, I am a sex and love addict in recovery. So when I was acting out of sex and love addiction, I always had to be in a romantic partnership. I couldn't not be. And I didn't know at the time that I was using the combination of the hormones of falling in love and falling in lust to try to take away the pain of being me, the pain, the emotional pain that I felt inside me. I was using those highs. As I faced that I was, in fact, a sex and love addict and went into 12-step and went into recovery, I still have a vibrant libido. I still love to be in love or to have relationship, but I'm no longer compulsively driven. I can have discernment and even go for periods of time without. It's very similar to my food addiction. So I'm a compulsive overeater in recovery. And when I was driven by the compulsion to use food to take away my emotional pain, I would be eating trays of brownies, boxes of cookies, quarts of ice cream. I would eat until it physically hurt because the physical pain was easier than the emotional pain. When I went into 12-step and I went into recovery with food, I still love to eat. I still love to eat. I still eat food. I still have my favorite food. I just don't eat compulsively the same way. I can go at times be, oh, I'm not going to be able to get food right now. I'll be okay. I can go, and then I'm going to find something healthy, or I'll eat a little something until I have a meal. There's not this, oh my God, I need to eat, or I need to have it, which the addict has this compulsion. I need it. I need to have it. I have to have it. And so if I'm saying I have to have it with this kind of feeling, this is a compulsion. And just because I'm healing that compulsion doesn't mean I no longer want food or I no longer want sexual intimacy. Yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way first. So talking about how do we know the difference between sexual vibrancy and compulsion? How do we know the difference between just an intriguing sexual fantasy and one that might come from trauma? With sexual vibrancy versus compulsion, a compulsion always will have this sense of, I can't not have it. I'm driven. There's a sense, we even might say, I'll get depressed if I don't have it. So there's a sense of self-medication with it. And as a sex and love addict in recovery, as a compulsive overeater in recovery, I have a lot of compassion for when I was in addiction. And shame is not helpful. So shame actually fuels the addiction spiral. So I feel terrible and shameful. Therefore, I need more of whatever behavior or substance. Feels like it takes away the pain for a little while. Then I have the behavior or the substance, and then I feel worse. So then I need more of it. That is the addiction spiral. And
Yeah,
by the way, now that I'm no longer in addiction, I can say I'm still sexually vibrant. And now that I'm no longer an addict, I'm living in Sicily and I love food. So it's all good. It's all good.
I love that.
And so then now let's look at the fantasies themselves. Fantasies are like dreams. And I was taught in Jungian dream analysis that our dreams come to us as gifts from the soul. So if I dreamed about a chair or even having sex on a chair or have a fantasy about having sex on a chair, it doesn't mean that I need to go to IKEA and get a chair and have sex. That the chair might represent something. A chair could represent rest or support
Mm.
or being in my queendom. There's so many things that a chair might represent, and sex represents the life force. It represents energy itself. So often when we're looking at our fantasies, it's additive, it's a plus to say, let me unpack it a little bit. At the very least, we need to look at risk versus reward. So let's say, getting back to my dad, who was asking his daughter to be his lover. It's my assessment that many of us who are drawn, who sometimes have these fantasies about, heaven forbid, with younger people, it's that, and let's just say I'm 68 and I sometimes date people in their 30s. Sometimes it's that we want that joy, we want that vitality, we want that innocence in our own life. So there's something to look at around, how am I maybe denying it for myself? How can I recover it in me consciously rather than having to, in a sense, get it from someone else? A Jungian psychology often talks about the anima and the animus, that we often fall in love with our radiant shadow. They're so creative. They're so sensual. They have such emotional access. Now I'm saying that I don't. But what if I actually started to find these things in me? Doesn't mean that I won't love them. It'll mean that what I fall in love with is often a pointer to where I need to grow or what I need to look at in myself. So it's really rich when we start doing this. So an example could be, there was a client who came to me, he said, Francesca, I keep having cuckolding fantasies. Like every time my partner threatens to break up with me, I keep getting so turned on by the thought of seeing her having sex with someone else. And I said, let me get this straight. You only have these fantasies when she's threatening to break up with you. And he said, yes. And I said, not other times. He said, no. And I said, have you ever heard about Eros and Thanatos? So Thanatos is the death force, depression, losing a will to live. With enough Thanatos, we kill ourselves. And Eros is not just sexuality, it is the life force. It's the ability to enjoy looking at a sunset, smelling a flower. It's the life force. And it includes sexuality. So often when we had trauma, our very brilliant brain will eroticize it to keep us from being too depressed about it. So I explained this to him, and he said, oh, wow, I think my psyche is trying to keep me from being too depressed when my partner threatens to leave me or leaves me. I said, does that feel true to you? And he said, yes, it feels true to me. And then I said, knowing that feels true to you, do you think that you need to fulfill this cuckolding fantasy? And he said, no.
I mean,
Now
that's
he was
fair.
still kinky. He was still
Right.
kinky. He still had other kinks that he wanted to enjoy and explore. But that particular one, he had the question in his mind before he even came to me. If he had no question about it, he would have just done it. He had a question in his mind. Is this actually the right thing? And then I helped him look. Let's look at where this might be coming from. Many people who've been raped will have rape fantasies, and they're confused by it. Their psyche is trying to keep them from the depression of feeling like they just want to die after a rape. So we want to kind of test drive this concept. It may not apply to every single fantasy. I had a partner in my polyamorous, I've been 40 years in non-monogamy. I have a lot of data. 7. And so at one of my partners only fucked me. He didn't kiss me. He didn't hold me. He didn't caress me. Just wham, bam. And this is not my favorite way of making love. And I, as an experiment, as a field researcher of life, I decided to experiment with, how can I work with what he has to give me? So instead of making him wrong, how could I actually work with it? So when we were having sex, I would ask my psyche, I just like open-ended question, hey, psyche, give me a fantasy. And the fantasy was of like a Catholic basilica with a circle of cardinals in red. And I was in the center of this circle, pleasuring these cardinals and being pleasured by them. And this is the only time in my life I've ever had this fantasy. I never had this fantasy before dating him. I never had this fantasy after dating him. And when I unpacked it psychologically, what does a church and cardinals represent? It represents the sacred. So my psyche was trying to give me a sense of the sacred
Wow.
in this fantasy while he was just pounding away.
And it worked.
And it worked. And I looked at it. So when I look at fantasies, I analyze risk versus reward. And I analyze, is this a fantasy that's meant to remain in the level of fantasy? So that was a perfectly fine fantasy on the level of fantasy. I didn't want to recreate it. I didn't want to go into a basilica and get a bunch of guys to dress as cardinals in red. That would, in fact, have ruined it. Another one favorite fantasy for me is a pirate. I'm walking by the sea at sunset in a beautiful long blue gown. My hair is blowing in the wind, and suddenly I see a pirate ship. Oh no. And on the pirate ship, there's a very handsome pirate with long dark hair and an open shirt and a manly chest. And I'm frightened, but somehow frozen in place. So as I'm like frozen, oh no, the ship is getting closer and I can't move. Oh my, this pirate, so handsome and yet somehow dangerous, is getting closer and I can't move. Oh no. And then somehow magically he's in a rowboat and somehow magically he's at the shore and somehow magically he scoops me up in his arms and he rows me back to the ship. And somehow magically we're on deck and none of the deck hands are around and we're just the two of us on deck. I don't have a fantasy of being watched. So it's the two of us on deck and the sun is still slowly setting. And suddenly he's ravishing me. So basically this would mean ripping off my clothes. However, when I look to the side, I see all of my beautiful clothes neatly folded
Which
next
is
to
a
me.
great part of the fantasy.
It's a great part of the fantasy because you do not want to ruin my
That's
clothes.
That's right.
You do not want to do it.
That's not a part of the fantasy.
Oh no, a boyfriend did this once where he thought it would be fun to pull me into the bathtub fully dressed. And it like
Oh.
ruined my outfit. And it ruined the moment because you hurt my clothing.
Yes.
So at any rate, my clothes are folded neatly to the side of me. And then he is ravishing me just perfectly, the way I've always wanted. And I never have to say higher, lower, more to the left, more to the right, slow down. Like he knows. He knows. And even though I'm on a wooden deck, I never get splinters.
That's incredible.
It's incredible. So I've had so many boyfriends. I can't tell you how many boyfriends I have that are sailors. And when I tell them my fantasy, they say, oh, let me do this fantasy for you. Let me be your pirate. And I'm like, no, don't do it.
I love
You're
that.
gonna ruin the fantasy.
You will ruin the fantasy. So we have to assess, is this a fantasy that deserves to be brought into real life? And also, I recommend erotic hypnosis. So if my sailor boyfriend actually wanted to give me the fantasy in a safe way, we could be on the boat, he could take off my clothes, and then he could guide me in an erotic hypnosis of having all of this happen. And the brain cannot tell the difference between something that's powerfully imagined and something that really happens. All the same delicious hormones will go off in my body while I'm in the hypnosis as if it had really happened without ruining my clothes or getting splinters.
Wow. I've never actually heard of that. I think that's
Love
interesting.
that.
That's interesting. Me personally, and this is something that my wife and I have spoken about a lot. One of my kinks is the hot wife kink. And I really enjoy the thought of her. And it's almost a consensual cheating, per se,
Mhm.
that I enjoy. So I like the idea of her going out without me and finding somebody that she's attracted to and just being in the moment, having her fun as a married woman cheating, and she doesn't tell me anything. It just all takes place. And then after everything's said and done, she has a great time. She comes back home to me and then she tells me. This is not her kink, but this is my kink.
It is not mine.
It's not something that we share, but really it comes down to my own personal trauma. So I grew up in an abusive household. I was never really told that my parents loved me or my siblings or anything like that. I didn't get a whole lot of love in my household. Then you fast forward throughout my high school years, my college years, I was unsuccessful at love. I was unsuccessful as far as the pursuing of women that I was interested in. I just wasn't successful at it. I never really felt wanted. Then you fast forward to my first marriage, and it was a loveless 7-year marriage. We were not meant for each other. And that's really where I first noticed that I had these thoughts of being very turned on at the thought of her cheating on me. And then when we got together, my current wife, Pris, and I got together, it was something that we explored, and I've been able to have those
We
experiences with.
different. He came from a household that didn't have that, and I came from the opposite. My parents were very loving. I was very spoiled. And so it's very different, but we try to make it work.
Yeah, yeah. But I always found it incredible how my specific kink came from and was rooted in the trauma that I had.
Mhm.
And I know that a lot of people that I've talked to in the lifestyle have had similar situations where the kinks that they have apply to the trauma that they've had in the past. So I found that real interesting.
Mhm.
It is very interesting and it's very rich. If you wanted to do that fantasy, you could do it with an erotic hypnosis.
Mhm.
You could do it that way. But there's also something about how do we heal? And I think there's something in the fantasy, if it were me, where my partner, I'm eroticizing something traumatic, which is my partner or my family not being there for me. So I'm actually eroticizing this distance in a sense, or their connection with others rather than me. But in the fantasy, they also come back to me. So there's this sense of return.
Yeah.
And if I were doing it as a healing fantasy, I would want to really tune into which age or ages most wanted that sense of being
Mm.
held and heard and connected with. And I would do the entire scene, so to speak, really bringing back the connection to the ages that most need it, letting them know that they are now loved, that they are now seen, that they are now held. I was spanked as a child and never thought that I deserved it. So, in my mind, and I raised my son without ever hitting him or yelling at him, I felt that I deserved to be talked to age appropriately for whatever age I was, but actually explained. And I noticed even as a child that parents will punish children for rules that we don't know exist.
Hmm.
Like we don't know that you're supposed to wear clothes exists as a rule until we're told. We don't know that don't draw on the wall is a rule until we're told. There's all these kind of cultural rules that we don't know and we're punished for them without knowing them. I was actually at a party with my partner at the time, and the party had a little dungeon downstairs, and we went downstairs and we were just trying some different toys on the wall. But at one point I had an idea and I said, "Honey, can we sit across from each other knee to knee?" He said, "Okay." I said, "I think I want to do something about being slapped as a child." And he said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" And so we're sitting knee to knee and we're eye gazing. And I say, when I touch like your right knee, if I touch your right knee, then slap that side of my face. When I touch your left knee, slap that side of my face. And only slap me if I touch your knee. And he said, okay. So we were eye gazing, and then I would touch his knee and he would slap my face, the side that I pointed to basically or touched. And as we were doing this, at first, laughter came up. And laughter is often one of the ways that we avoid feeling deeper. So I knew that. And so a lot of us will say, oh, I was like beaten all the time, or my parents were never around. And we'll say these things as if it's funny because the laughter is trying to protect us. So I just breathed through the laughter. And then as we kept going, based on I was in charge, I started to cry and tears were just running down my face. And as we kept going, based on my direction, I started to feel rage, just rage. And we were at someone's birthday party. And when I was laughing quietly downstairs, I knew it wouldn't disturb the party. And when I was just had tears quietly rolling down my face, they were upstairs. I knew it would not disturb the party. But at the point that I was starting to feel rage and just wanted to start screaming, God fucking damn it, or whatever I was going to start screaming, I thought, there is not consent
Mm.
in this particular space for how rage wants to move through me. So I brought it to a pause. After that, we had a couple more little explorations. I also gave him some oral pleasure. Later, we talked about it, and he said, none of the other things that we did, including receiving oral pleasure by you, Francesca, he goes, none of that was as intimate or as powerful as when we were sitting knee to knee. And you were guiding me at the pace that you needed to be slapped and to feel what you needed to feel. He's like, that was so profound.
Wow. That sounds very sensual and
Powerful.
yeah, very powerful. I like that.
Man, that is incredible. I'm going to swing us on a different tangent here, no pun intended. Let's talk about the long game, actually. So, how do couples keep passion alive, especially when they're juggling non-monogamy on top of everyday life?
We're busy parents.
Yeah.
We're busy parents.
How old are your kids? How
So
many?
we
How
have-
old?
So we have 5. We have a 25-year-old who just moved to Washington.
Yeah.
We have 4 in the house. So 19, 18, and 2 14-year-olds.
Yeah.
We're a blended family, but all of our kids are months apart.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, our oldest are 6 months apart and our little ones are 3 months apart.
And we've been raising them since the youngest was 3 months.
So I've had custody of
Mm.
my kids forever, or since they were born, and so they've always been together. But it's a very busy life, and
Yeah, and anybody who's non-monogamous, and especially if they're exploring relationship portions of it, it takes time,
It
and
does.
there's connections that need to be made, and time needs to be put in. And so it's a juggle for sure. So what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that, in a way, regardless of whether we're monogamous or non-monogamous, there can be a million reasons why we can become distracted from nourishing our partnership. Some people go to workaholism. Some people hang out with the boys or the girls. There's a number of ways where people start to non-prioritize the primary partnership or the nesting or the anchor partner. And a long-term relationship really does need structure. We can't just make love when we're in the mood. We have to, I believe that we really have to do our sexuality, whether it's kinky, non-kinky, or some combination, as almost like a devotional practice, a spiritual practice. It's one of my favorite things that I've learned from Taoism and Tantra is that when we engage in certain breath practices and certain kind of visualization practices, we can create arousal in our own bodies. So the average person thinks that they need a combination lock dialed by someone else. I can only find my arousal if you touch me here, touch me there, say this, say that, do this, do that. Like you need to know my combination lock, which is always changing, so that I can achieve my arousal. That is a recipe for disaster in a long-term relationship. We need to know, how do I access my own arousal and raise it and lower it at my own choice? That means that I can have a date with my partner and do engage in the practices together that will build arousal during the date. And to me, conscious sexuality is kind of like working out. I always feel better afterwards. Like I never want to go work out. But if I do, I'll feel better afterwards. And sexercise is my favorite exercise. So
Yes.
I'm like, okay, we're just going to do the things. So I would say have a regular minimum 2 hours set aside where you won't be bothered. Some couples go to the no-tell motel. They need to get out of the house to feel like they really have the freedom, especially the women will often feel like they need to get out of the house so they have the freedom to make the sounds and do the things that they really want to do, which they can't do in the house. And that they're always thinking, oh, are the kids making trouble? Are they getting something? Did they break something? What was that sound? So I recommend get out. And then, yeah, I had a couple that I think they saved their marriage to start going to the no-tell motel for a couple of hours. And then when you go to, if you can do it in the house, great. Some people have a little cottage in the back, or they'll have something that's a little separate in the grounds. So if you could do it that way, great. But you want to make sure that the space feels lovely. So if you're at the no-tell motel, I have a different couple that I worked with to turn an office that was a little bit separate into the boudoir of love. And so we like redecorated it. You're going to bring cloths, like scarves, and put it over the lamps. You want to make sure you bring twinkle lights. You want to transform the environment into something that's actually appealing very quickly. And you want to have your wow chicka wow playlist. You want to have the playlist that feels lovely, usually slower. So something that feels like more slow and sensual, because to create arousal, we actually start with relaxation. It's the opposite of what we see in porn or romantic films.
Very
Long-term
true.
couples need to actually have the practices to build arousal from relaxation. So it usually starts with caressing and awakening the body, the full body, and not just going for the genitals immediately, but actually awakening the entire body.
Are you listening?
I'm listening, taking notes.
So for me, because I found that for many men, they didn't take good notes. So it was hard for them to really slow down and not go directly to the breasts or the asshole or the vulva. So what I did is I would just say, honey, could I give you a massage for a while? And I've never had a partner say, no, don't give me a massage. Don't do it. Stop, Francesca. So then what I do is I slow it down and I guide this breathing in the nose to the count of 4, out the mouth to the count of 8, in the nose to the count of 4, out the mouth to the count of 8. I guide the breathing. I slow us both down. I put us into this beautiful trance-like state. And just, how men get these lovely erections first thing in the morning, when they're relaxed, we go into this relaxed state. Our beloved, if they have a phallus, will get a beautiful erection. But if they don't have a phallus, the vulva will still engorge. And the fact that I'm taking this time and I'm breathing and I'm caressing, my vulva will also engorge and I will feel ready to make love. And I usually do that for 40 minutes. I'll just put on my favorite music, something really lovely, and go into my own trance state. I'll use a certain amount of rocking the body as well. And then arousal naturally happens. And then lovemaking from there is really beautiful. Now, if you're kinky, you could also do a combination of that with kink by more awakening the body with a fur mitt, kind of a fur mitt, awakening the whole body with fur, then moving to maybe some tapping or going into flogging. Then you can do some smacking, or if the person likes some caning, moving up to an intensity of endorphins. And it only takes 5 seconds of intense pain to release endorphins. And so you could do a few blips of that and then come back down. You could create a certain arc like that in kink as well, if you prefer it.
I like that.
Francesca, you're turning me on. Sorry.
So, Francesca, what's one myth about kink or open relationships that makes you roll your eyes every time you hear it? Is there something that just is really?
I guess that the one about kink would be to say that the kink is always going to be a trauma. And I really feel like it's more like a taste in food. Do you know how some people like food that's so spicy that for me, I would be like, oh my God, I can't even take a bite of that. And some people like food that's so bland that I would say I can't take a bite of it. but we have personal tastes when it comes to food, how bland, how spicy, how crunchy, how smooth. And I feel that the body has personal tastes when it comes to sexuality. And kink is a lot about sensation, role play, and power exchange. But I think there's a whole layer of it's just like, how do we like food?
Yeah.
And how do we like our sexual sensation? And so, yeah, that it would all be from trauma. I would completely roll my eyes.
Mm.
And then also when people say that non-monogamy is normal and non-monogamy is not normal.
I roll
So,
my eyes on that too.
yeah, so when we look across culture and throughout time, what we see is that there's a range. And let's say if we had a tribe, let's say we have a tribe of a couple of hundred people, and there might be some people in the tribe that would pair bond like little lovebirds, and they might just, that's what they like. And they hang out their entire lives. And maybe even when they were like teenagers, we saw that they just seemed to be like soulmates, and they've just vibed with that their whole life. Good on them.
Mhm.
And then there'd be some people in the tribe that might never pair bond at all. They might always be that person that prefers to be independent, that maybe lives a little bit more by themselves, that maybe comes in to offer a helping hand in various couples, and they like to float. And they just like to float. That's who they are. They like to float. And then I think if there was no negative connotations to any of our choices, I think at different times of our life, we might choose different designs and formats. So maybe when I am a young mother, maybe I want to pair quad bond with another couple who has young kids so that we all take care of our kids together and we're supporting each other. But then maybe later it feels like too much emotional labor. So maybe I want to say, no, now I'm going to focus more on my primary partner and we'll see you now and then, or something else. I think it would just change at different times of my life.
That's very true.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, there's a big word that I throw around often when it comes to non-monogamy, and that's jealousy. Obviously, we all have dealt with it at one point or another. It shows up for everybody at some point. What's your best advice for not letting it wreck things?
I have a document that I'm happy to share called Don't Call It Jealousy.
Ooh.
Oh, great.
I don't
Yes.
call it jealousy.
And
I call it territorial.
yeah, she
So
always
I'm
refers
gonna
to it as
the
territorial.
reason I'm gonna say don't call it jealousy is because let's say we have 5 monogamous, non-monogamous couples here. And let's say every one of these couples experiences jealousy. But now I ask, what is the flavor of jealousy for you? And someone might say, when my partner's with someone else, I'm terrified. I'm terrified. I shake and I'm
Mhm.
just so afraid that they'll find someone better than me and leave me. Then I ask the next person, what's your flavor of jealousy? And they say, I'm enraged. I'm just enraged. Like they took, their lover to our favorite restaurant and they haven't taken me in months. And then someone else, I might say, what's your flavor of jealousy? And they might say, I just get so depressed.
It does come differently for different people.
And so what I say, that's why I say don't call it jealousy. So if someone is having feeling about their partner being with someone else, then I'm going to say, what are the flavor of those feelings? And let's look a little deeper. Does it feel, because we have one body, but inside us is every age we've ever lived. Inside of me is still a little girl that wants to know, do you love me and am I safe? Inside me is a rebellious teenager. You're not the boss of me. You don't get to tell me what to do. Inside of me is a romantic teenager that just wants to find my Romeo and be with him forever in the eternal sunset. Inside of me is the healer priestess. There's all these different, let's not forget the erotic vampire that likes to raise erotic energy and feed off of it. And then there's the primal that might want to hunt or be hunted. There's all these different people inside me. So when I'm talking to couples, I might say, let's look a little deeper. What are the thoughts in your head? And what are the feelings? What I'm just like so scared. And what keeps coming up is I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. What's the youngest that you felt so scared and that you felt like you weren't good enough? Oh, my whole life. So this goes back very young. I feel this rage. Like, how dare they put energy on other people? How dare they say that someone else is important to them? I feel rage and I feel this sense of like injustice. What's the youngest that you felt the sense of rage and the sense of injustice? I think it was when I was a teenager and I didn't get picked or whatever. Okay, then let's go back there. So the bigger the emotional response in the present,
Mm.
the more the roots are actually in the past. The bigger the emotional reaction in the present, the more the roots are in the past. And when we can go and follow that red thread back to the past and bring healing there, then we can come back to the present. And there's what remains is an invitation for collaboration. What remains is a request. There might be a boundary, but none of the emotional intensity is needed for any of that. When I'm actually in my integrated adult state, I can make positive requests, invitations for collaboration, and express a limit or a boundary like I'm talking to you.
Mm.
So when I'm in the, which I have experienced all about that, by the way. So I've gone through massive terror, massive rage. I've been in non-monogamous partnerships for 40 years, and I've had 17 primary partnerships. And they have been like such a beautiful place for me to see my trauma.
Mm.
And in the early days, I would say, you are traumatizing me. If I'm having uncomfortable feelings around you, it's your fault. But the blessing of having different partnerships over time is you end up being the common denominator.
Yeah.
It's hard to just say you're the problem when it's the same, when it shows up again and again with different people. And it's
I'm
like,
never
oops,
the problem.
I'm never the problem.
I'm never
And
the
then
problem.
eventually, I'm a smart girl. I can eventually figure out
Right?
that it's me. And eventually I was able, my last non-monogamous partner here in Palermo, when we started to date him, I went, oh my God, he reminds me so much of my ex-dominant. And my higher self said, okay, Francesca, he is a lot like your ex-dominant. And you have a choice. You remember how things went with your ex-dominant. You can just not date this man. That would be fine. Or guess what? In your ex partnership, you tried to control, we'll call him Tom. You tried to control Tom. You tried to control who Tom dated and who Tom was attracted to. And you had endless arguments. So if you're going to date Andrea, male, Andrea is a male name here. If you're going to date Andrea, then you change. You change because you already know how it's going to look if you don't. Are you willing to date this man knowing that the same issues in you are going to come up, Francesca, and actually choose to work on them? So when my insecurity came up and my urge to control came up, I did what I just said. I went back to where's the root of this in me and used this as an opportunity to heal my inner tribe. And then I would go to him with an invitation to collaborate or a request or very occasionally a boundary. And by the way, it's not a boundary if you're not willing to end the relationship over it.
Oh,
It's just a
Oh.
complaint.
that's interesting.
I
And we can only control what we think and feel. We can't control what other people
Yeah.
do, think,
And
or feel.
you did point something out, and I probably am going to express it a different way. But when I got with Adam, I did have to change a lot of my ways. I was only in two other primary. I was married when I was 18, and then I got divorced, and then I got married again when I was like 24, got divorced, and then I got with Adam. So I never really dated, but I did realize that looking back on those relationships, that I had to change my ways to make this work. And that took a lot of, because I was so jealous back then. When I was younger, I was a very jealous and controlling person. I'm still a very territorial and controlling person, but I'm more talkative about it. I express myself in different ways. I know how to use my words better. And he doesn't have a problem with it as I stab him. He doesn't have a problem with it. It's just the way I express it. But I did have to understand that I couldn't bring that kind of mentality to this relationship. Like I knew it had to in order for this to work, I had to grow as a person myself and understand where he was coming from, and he had to understand where I was coming from in that not jealousy
Yeah.
word. So
Yeah, we both had to grow in order
yeah.
to make this relationship, and we're still working on.
Oh yeah. We learn things about each other, things I don't like or things he doesn't like. We're learning every single day, and we've been together forever. I feel like it's forever,
It's
but
been
it's
15 years.
yeah.
Yeah, so we want to grow. Obviously, we want to get better at what we do in life.
And that's a healthy relationship. A healthy relationship is two people growing at the edge of their zone of tolerance
Mm.
towards each other. Because if we just want everything our own way, then we should just stay with ourselves. I like the same music. I like the same books I like. I have so much in common with me.
Yeah, yeah. I like my
And we know people that subscribe to that policy.
yeah.
You
It
know?
works for them.
Yeah. So we understand that you are an expert on empowering aging and sexuality, and that you're an advocate for education on menopause. Pris actually had her own struggles with menopause and the lifestyle. Actually, she went through the thick of it, or the perimenopause, when we were poly. And not only were we polyamorous at that time, but we were also living in two separate cities because she was in the process of setting us up in Central Texas, where we eventually moved to. And so there, as you can imagine, there was a lot going on during that time. So with your expertise on this, I'm going to go ahead and turn over the next few questions over to Pris, because obviously I can't really say anything on the matter. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
This is my favorite part right here because I'm in menopause. I was diagnosed 2019 and I hit it earlier. I'm 47. I hit it earlier because I had a hysterectomy. And it wasn't so much of the sex part. Like I didn't feel like sex was over for me, anything like that. And I didn't have that type of feeling. For me, it was more mental. I couldn't wrap my head around the sex part in every single day we want to, or I even had motions where I was like, I can't, I want to have sex every single day. So it was really up and down for me, and he
Yeah.
wasn't around, along with depression and all of that. So I would love to just pick your brain on how one can, what's the word I'm looking for? How one can bring those two together.
Yeah, not only in the lifestyle, but in life period.
Yeah, it's
I'm
hard.
sure it's difficult.
It's very hard. It brings you into menopause it can bring you into depression sometimes, and you don't want to think about sex at all.
Yeah, I would say that a couple things. There's perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. So perimenopause can last up to 13 years, 7 to 13 years, and it can start as early as the mid 30s, but often more like in the 40s. And its signs of perimenopause can be weight gain, migraines, wrinkles, gray hair, bloating, depression, anxiety, trouble sleeping. There's just a whole list, and I do have a document on this as well. And then menopause is the year a woman doesn't have a period, and postmenopause is everything after that. And I've studied at the anti-aging medicine conferences to know that we can positively impact the way that we age and significantly reduce the symptoms of aging, or we don't have to lose our libido, etc. And what this usually takes is working with a functional medicine specialist, a preventive medicine specialist, a sports medicine specialist, and a naturopath, somebody who's actually trained in anti-aging. The average physician, even the average endocrinologist or gynecologist, knows nothing really about the nuance of anti-aging. And like there are old studies that say that taking hormone replacement is dangerous for women. It's not. The studies were based on a synthetic hormone, not on natural bioidentical hormone.
Thank you.
So you really need to find somebody who is up to date on this information. And in many cases, taking supplements like DHEA is a precursor to testosterone and progesterone. There's progesterone creams, estrogen creams. And another thing that can happen to women is vaginal atrophy, which makes having sex like 1,000 paper cuts in your vagina.
Oh my God.
And ouch, like super ouch. But this can also be treated. And so there's a lot that can be done to make sure that we're aging with mental clarity and vitality. Many women will start to experience like waves of fatigue that go through them, not just at their period anymore, or waves of irritability, not just right before their period anymore. I was going through perimenopause when my son was going through puberty. And that's why I became so committed to find this information, because I thought this is a recipe for like murder. If I'm going through hormonal swings and he's going through hormonal swings, like this is a disaster. So one of us has to be more steady, and it's not going to be my son. And my son later said that he was filled with rage, like his testosterone spike had him filled with rage until about 23. So we need to do this. So in the document, there's resources on the Anti-Aging Medicine Association, resources on books to read, so that you really have somebody who's an ally for you to get that information that you need. And it's going to be individual. We're not like widgets. We're not just like
Yeah.
manufactured, like where every woman is the same. Because our genetic makeup, I might naturally have more estrogen. Someone might naturally have more testosterone. So we can't just say every woman at this age is going to need the same supplements.
I always find it, a lot of our friends are probably around the same age as us. So in their early 40s and 50s. Culturally, I'm Latina. My mom did not even talk about that, was a taboo subject. We don't talk about menopause. I am very open. As soon as I knew I was in menopause, I told my children, I told my husband, I explained everything to them. So my kids, and we have 3 boys, know what it is. They also know that I have ADHD, right? So I'm very open. But I do find it hard when I talk to my friends. They don't know, like, they don't want to admit it, and they don't even know how to express it to their spouses or to their partners that they're going through menopause, because things like that can happen where you need estrogen creams and when you need the patches and stuff like that. And I'm with you. I think hormone replacement is amazing. You should do your research and find out what works best for you. But how do you
And
how can you bring that up to your partner? What are some do you
so I
think
think
folks-
that the main thing is that we really have to break the curse of aging and cast a new enchantment. So in our culture, there's this feeling that somehow aging is a betrayal, that we should never age, and that there's something shameful about aging. And that if we're aging, we're going to be marginalized, or if we're aging, we are going to lose our libido, or we're not going to be valued. And I just decided that I was going to break that curse and cast a new enchantment, so that aging is an opportunity. Aging is an opportunity for grace, for wisdom. My image for aging is Isis spreading her wings. And so at 68 or 60 great, as I like to say, my life has gotten more and more beautiful. I travel the world. I'm completely honored. I categorically have people of all ages finding me attractive and wanting to be sexual with me. I don't feel like I'm marginalized in the smallest bit, like not even the littlest bit. I find that I've become more discerning about who I want to have sex with, but I don't feel that I'm marginalized or not desirable because I've done this work. Now, in the beginning, even saying I was like 50, I was almost afraid to say I was 50 or afraid to say I was 46. But I kept saying, Francesca, you are breaking the curse of aging. You are creating an empowered pathway. You have to find the courage to stand tall and not hide this. And so I have. So we practice being more comfortable. I feel a lot of becoming the kind of people that we want to be, these kind of shows, being a clinical sexologist, being somebody who wants to be a coach or a healer for others. I have to become comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I have to be someone who can express these things. So sometimes we might practice with a friend, but I just say it and I post it on my social media and I talk about it with people like you. And so if somebody says, I say, how old are you? They say, how old do I look? Or I don't want to say. I say, okay, I'll just say.
Yeah. I'm the same
because
way.
I feel that they're holding this trauma in the culture around aging, but I don't have to believe in that curse. I can move beyond it.
Perfect. So, Francesca, thank you so much for hanging out with us. That was one of those conversations where you just sit back and go, damn, I learned a lot today. It's a
Go.
lot to process, a lot going on. So, we're definitely going to have you back on the show a couple more times.
Yes.
We really appreciate you bringing the realness and the wisdom. So, that was really cool.
Yes. Thank you, Francesca. This was deep. It was hot. It was very knowledgeable. And I know our listeners are going to learn a lot from this one, especially the documents that you're going to have. So I appreciate all of that. And we'll make sure to drop all your links on the show and give you that shout out.
For sure. Yeah. We'll have everything in our show notes as well as any documents that you want to share that we can share with our listeners. We'll absolutely have that on there as well. And hey, if you loved this conversation, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Drop us a review, all that good stuff. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and at our website, beyond-monogamy.com.
Yes. Yes. And don't forget, we're on all our socials, TikTok, Reddit, and all the places. So come hang out with us.
Absolutely. And with that, we will see you guys next week.
Bye.